Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Connecting Dots podcast. As usual, I'm your host, Usama, and today we're joined by another very cool technology professional all the way from Stockholm, Sweden. Her name is Marie, and for the past 30 years of her career, she's been heavily involved in developing the next G of the telecom industry. So in the upcoming conversation, we'll get to talk to her about a role of being the leader of 6G portfolio strategy and how her journey had been overall. So with that, we formally welcome you to the show, Mary. How had your day been so far?
Thank you very much. Delighted to be here, Usama. Thanks so much for the invite. My day so far has been great. It's 6 o'clock in Sweden. I played a very bad round of golf earlier, and other than that, all good.
Right. So, Mary, I'm honestly very interested and very excited to be learning about your journey that you had in the telecom industry. So, to the point that you're at right now, all the way going back to the point where you started from. So, now if you were to look back at the journey from a very holistic point of view, what are some of the roles that you've taken in the past, and how had this journey overall been for you?
So I started, as you said, 3 decades ago. It sounds like a very long time ago now. And I'm constantly surprised at, I guess, the things that continue to evolve in the telecoms industry. I did electrical and electronic engineering as a degree in university in Ireland, and I joined the first company that I worked for as a programmer, basically. I'm not a great programmer, I must say, but I did some coding, and then after 2 years, moved to Ericsson. Then I did a little coding, then team leading, some testing. So I've sort of worked my way up through the product development angle, if you like, more than the research, and team leading, project management for a while. That was probably the role I liked least. I think it suits some people a lot. To me, it was a lot of responsibility, but you couldn't really get involved in the work directly yourself, more managing other people's work as such. And then system design in various Gs, and the last sort of big leap in terms of moving to a different kind of career path was to product management, and then headed up some different sections in product management, and now I'm working on 6G. And each time I move career or change G, if you like, because I've worked on 2G, 3G, 4G, 5G, now 6G. Each time I sort of seem to get earlier and earlier in the life cycle. So that's a rough outline of where I've been so far.
Amazing. And I really would ask you that sometimes, do you ever reflect on how technology has evolved? Like, I'll give you an example. Last month, I was doing some throughput testing, and with 5G, I was literally, for a second, I was in shock. I was like, it's amazing how much of downlink and uplink speeds we're getting. So do you sometimes think about it, how we've evolved from 2G to now 6G?
I mean, it's phenomenal when you think of it. I mean, when I left college, and yes, that was quite a while ago. We didn't have any mobile phones, and I remember I got my first mobile phone when Ericsson made mobile phones. It was a little grey, very engineering-y, but super cool at the time, with a flip-top lid. And I got it when I became a project manager in Dublin. And all my friends thought, "Wow, that's super cool," but I didn't have anybody to call. Right? No, nobody had a mobile phone except for the other project managers in Ericsson, and that was with the tiny little screen, and you could send a text or make calls, and that was super cool. Connect somebody, on the go as such. And then in 3G, we had a bit of a bigger screen, and you could look up like bus timetables and connect to the internet. It was like awesome. And then when we got to 4G and the big phones, it was I remember it was when I started product management first, when 4G LTE was before it was launched, and I sat in my first product management meeting, and we were saying, oh, you need all these different spectrum bands, and how much gigabits is that? Oh, it's like 100 megabits. As who on earth would need that much data? and now I mean 6G, we're looking at 40 to 100 gigabytes, right? So things seem to move.
Yeah, no, I remember one of the very early on phones that I had was Sony Ericsson K750i as well. If I'm remembering it correctly, I think it had like an 8 megapixel camera, and it was a huge hype that how much of a clear picture we can get. And now I think 8 megapixels is nothing anymore.
Exactly. I mean, I look at my kids, and they grew up with this. It's my youngest, when he went to the daycare here in Sweden first. He was part of a program where they gave them iPads to see, to do some learning, and so he's never really known what it was like not to have this technology, and yeah, it's just.
But anyways, yeah, going to a bit more specifics of it now. So Mary, considering your current position of 6G portfolio strategy leadership, what do you think is the scope of the position, and what are the general responsibilities of a person who would be successfully executing in it?
So the role I have now as 6G portfolio strategy head is, I would say, it's very early in the product life cycle. We haven't really defined what 6G is. We work from the portfolio side with our very experienced and competent Ericsson research colleagues who have been, experimenting and working on different concepts. And my job now is to, I guess you could say, create order out of chaos a little bit. And we're trying to put together a picture of what 6G will be and when it should happen, and what benefits it can bring and what it can enable. So we're creating a structure basically out of all of these very interesting concepts and pieces of knowledge. Some things we can put in our portfolio, some things will happen later, and some things maybe we can never do. So it's assessing that kind of picture from the bird's eye view, and then starting to funnel it into a product plan, if you like.
Interesting. And considering the fact that whatever next G comes is being used by almost every country on the planet. So what are the general stakeholders involved when defining standard for the next G? Let's put it that way.
Yeah, so it's a huge, as you say, it's global, right? And it's a huge sort of democratic effort, in a sense, to create a standard set of specifications that all of the mobile devices, smartphones, laptops, maybe smartwatches, machines, that they can have a set of interfaces to connect to the network or the infrastructure. So ourselves and our competitors and our partners and the full ecosystem have to get together already now, even though maybe 6G won't happen commercially to 2029 or 2030, and start talking about the direction we want it to go in. And then there's a lot of work, consensus building, not always aligned, obviously, and there's some give and take, compromises from both sides, and prioritizing certain things. I think one thing that we sort of as an industry feel is very important is to keep one global standardization specification together. So you can have, a mobile phone in India connecting to a network in the UK, or you can have a laptop in, US connecting to the same network when it moves to Italy. It's very important for scalability and global mobility, if you like. So a lot of groups in the discussion, I would say, and then it's a little bit, kind of a big democratic sort of scenario where you discuss different aspects. And that's partly why it takes so long, right? It's 10-year cycle really between Gs.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And if we were to just extrapolate the thought just a little bit, so considering like from an outsider's perspective, or from a very simplistic point of view, I would say, if we can categorize major players, it's either vendor companies, operators, or there are chip manufacturers. So what do you think are each of these segments having their key focus areas or their strategic priorities when it comes to agreeing on certain standards? So what do you think had it been overall for you?
You mean from the point of view of what is a sort of big priority for each of these groups? Is that
Yeah, so let's say a chip manufacturer might be pushing for a certain thing to be added, an operator might be looking at it from a different perspective, and the third party from a different perspective. So what are some of
one
the
of the
key
angles?
strategic points, for example, for them?
Yeah, and I'd probably add, as well as infrastructure vendors and device chipset partners and operators, you can probably also add, regulators and governments to that
Yes.
picture. So if I start with maybe regulators, spectrum, we need spectrum to run a mobile network. And then, of course, there's lots of players in the spectrum domain. There's satellites, there are fixed wire services, lots of different things. So, firstly, there's a discussion about what spectrum the G can run on, where it will be allowed to operate, so it doesn't interfere with other things, for example. And then governments and bodies like the European Union or USA or whatever, they would like for the evolution of the technology to have some benefit for society. Maybe it's optimizing food production or energy efficient ways of connecting people, these kinds of things. And then we come to those that build the systems, the infrastructure vendors that build the networks. And from our side, we want to build something that's efficient and cost effective, but will bring visible and obvious benefits both for a kind of society, and then benefits to like businesses and individual consumers. Of course, partly that is because we want to sell systems, but we need to take advantage of the evolution of technology, whether it's hardware or software or introduction of AI, for example, or lots of different things. And so we will want the technology to evolve to make effectively more efficient way of using the resources we have, like the spectrum and the hardware. And then you have the devices who would have the same type of view, but from the other side, if you like. And one thing that device and chipset partners would have a very strong drive for is power efficiency in the device. Their device is much smaller than our base station, if you like. So
Literally.
yeah, and then they have have different pressures to scale things down to a mobile device, for example, or a chipset that can fit in a car or a robot, etc. So kind of scalability and power usage or energy performance would be very important there. And then operators, of course, value for money is always great, or not great, it's a priority for them. So even if we have the best technology in the world that can do something as maybe engineers we think is fantastic, if they can't sell that to a consumer like you or me, or a smart factory like BMW, or whatever, to make something more efficient in the business process, if they can't sell these improvements, then they don't have an incentive to introduce a new G. And the other part that they would look at is kind of, cost savings. If they can do it more effectively and cheaper, then that's also interesting. So.
Right, absolutely. And I think from a technology management side, I can definitely add that at least with 5G, the management has become quite easy to understand, at least for anyone joining the industry. I would say that's another benefit that the consumers might not see, but for the people who work in the industry, I think it's a lot more manageable now.
Yeah, because the systems get more complicated as we do more things. So, as end users, when we have our mobiles, we're just like, well, this is too fast, or this is really good service, but you don't see how much time and effort it takes to put all that equipment out there to upgrade it, and the hidden challenges, as it were.
Exactly. So, Mary, now that this position has really enabled you to see this telecom world from, let's say, a 1,000-foot view, what do you think had been some of the myths that really got busted for you over the period of time?
I suppose over the years, I think actually it's a point that you made yourself earlier when we were chatting. Actually, it's that to build a system, to build a 4G network or a 5G network, it's not just a bunch of telecom engineers coding. It's a huge group of people with very different backgrounds and skills and personalities, even within the engineering side, right? You have people to design technically the system and the algorithms. You have software engineers. You have hardware engineers, and then you have design engineers for how things look and feel. You have people that are skilled in deploying things, where you put the boxes, how they connect to whatever. You have transport network specialists connecting the physical components of the network, and then you have a whole bunch of people involved in marketing, communicating, education, how the public should know about what these things do, or how you can educate maybe engineers and the customer side to run things. You have sales, you have pricing, you have regulatory groups, you have patent lawyers and engineers as well. So I think one of the things I've learned is, the bigger the network as an individual, the bigger the network you can build across the biggest range of skills, whether it's from marketing to really detailed algorithm experts, then you get a better picture and ability of how everything connects. There's everything's connected, and different people bring different things to the table in terms of building a system and getting it out there and getting it to be used in the best way possible.
Right, that's very interesting. And if you talk about your career journey, and if you take a holistic view of it, so how much of, I would say, risk taking have you done, or were you really fully prepared for some of the job roles that you've had, or you really took the risk, went for it, and then it turned out to be good in your favor? So how had that process been for you?
Yeah, I think no, there were definitely a few risks. Sometimes it's very easy, and I mean, it's not always the wrong thing to do either, but it's very easy to stay in the same role and be a bit comfortable and maybe be a little bit bored with the risk of moving elsewhere. Could I do it, or will it be safe enough, or whatever? So often when I took risks to take a kind of a role that I thought maybe was outside my scope or knowledge or capability, it was because I was encouraged by maybe a manager that I had at the time. So, offered me some specific role, and it's like, what? And they really pushed me to do it, and it worked out very well. So maybe it was having mentors that knew maybe my capability better than I sort of knew myself at the time. So, and then yourself, you sometimes have to just take that leap. I mean, what's the worst that could happen in some cases? So when I did those kind of a little bit more risk taking, it was pretty much always the sort of attraction part of it was learning the possibility of learning something really exciting. Like maybe it was a new role, or maybe I was a transport network system engineer for a while, for many years actually, and then became a product manager, but on the transport network track. And then I took the role as area product owner of 5G, which meant all the hardware and software before we had launched the system, which was a bit of a steep learning curve. But I think the thing is, you realize as you kind of go through these things that you're not on your own. There's a network, and I think that's the one thing I really do like about Ericsson is it's a very good network of people, and it's important, I think, wherever you work, to build up that group or network in different areas that you can call and say, what do you think of this? Or people you can bounce ideas off or ask for information. And don't feel you have to know everything, because I don't think it's possible.
Yeah. And now if you were to reflect on someone going from an individual contributor all the way to now being either in a managerial role, or even still being an individual contributor, but with a lot more to deliver than just a normal person working in a team. So taking that specific idea in mind, how do you think someone's perspective would change when they're making that transition? And what do you think would be some certain traits that would really make them successful in a management role instead of just being an individual contributor?
I think the ability to deal with people is really important. If you were to be a manager or a kind of technical leader in a larger sense, to know everybody's different, right? And even if you put two people doing the same job on paper, they will approach it differently and they will handle it differently. So I think you should know your immediate team and the kind of capabilities, and not be afraid of giving feedback and taking feedback. Sometimes it's more difficult to hear, feedback coming back that maybe isn't positive or is a bit concerned or something. So I think a two-way conversation with the team, an individual and the team, and team building is very important to get a kind of unit to work together and get buy-in. But as a leader or manager, you ultimately are responsible for taking the decisions in the end. And if you get consensus, that's great, but eventually there will have to be a decision on maybe way forward on certain things. So I think knowing your team and trying to encourage them and move forward from that point of view, and also I'm a firm believer in trusting people to do their define the roles excuse me, that you want people to do, and be clear on what those roles are, and then trust them. I mean, you can check in and see how it's going and offer support, but trust them to do that and not to micromanage everything. So I think that's quite important. Show that you trust the team as well that you're building or have developed.
Right. Very interesting. So with that, I want to talk a bit about work culture as well. I think small rituals or traditions really make the day a bit better than just doing the mundane tasks over and over again. So in that regard, do you have any cool traditions within the team that you work with?
I think one of the things actually that I like we didn't have as a tradition, say in Ireland where I worked first, and I worked in UK and even Canada actually for a couple of months as well. But then when I moved to Sweden, there's this tradition of fika, which I don't know if you've heard of that, but it's every week somebody on the team, it can be your immediate team or a couple of teams together, it is their turn to bring in this fika bread or cakes or something sweet to eat, and then at maybe 3 o'clock on a Friday or a certain designated time during the week, everybody will sort of down tools and sit down, and you have this coffee and cake, this fika. And that is it's really grown on me over the years. I've been in Sweden for quite a while now, and it's a really nice tradition actually. And if you have a customer meeting or something and you can't go, sometimes somebody would keep a piece of cake for you as well, and people really look forward to it, and you don't want to be the person to maybe forget your turn to bring the fika because you disappoint a lot of people. But it's a nice tradition, and it's you might talk about work, but most likely you probably don't. It could be anything, and it's just a kind of relaxed coffee and cake sort of thing. Yeah.
Excellent. And I've heard a lot of people talking about fika as well. And now, since you've been in Sweden for a significant amount of time, in your opinion, what do you think makes Swedish people really innovative? And the reason I ask is this: that Sweden is not a very big country, but if you look at the number of innovative companies that the country has produced, it's insane. What do you think is that fabric in the Swedish community or society that really enables this innovation overall?
I've wondered that a lot as well. I guess I can only mostly speak from my experience, within Ericsson, which is where I've been with Ericsson the whole time in Sweden. But the way I see people working, those that are, very creative or innovative or come up with these ideas, it's when they chat to each other, it's not really during meetings always. It's often when you bump into someone at the coffee machine or one of these fikas or something. You sit and you chat and maybe you brainstorm. And in Sweden it's not very hierarchical. I mean, you have a manager and a manager's manager, etc., but it's perfectly okay to go and brainstorm with a whole bunch of people, and they can be all sorts of different levels. So I think it's at least what I've seen, it's no idea is discarded or useless, bring your idea out, and maybe that's not the idea that's, the end result, but maybe it's contributing to something else and changes something else. So it's this ability to kind of discuss at all different levels and brainstorm and thrash something out. And in Sweden, people like to have consensus, which can sometimes mean decisions are a little bit slower happening, but often the results are very good. And the other side of that is that you get some new ideas and innovations coming out as well. So yeah, and I guess Sweden is so in Sweden everybody still speaks Swedish as the main language, but they speak perfect English as well. So I think they have lots of different influences. Maybe that helps the process as well.
Yeah, and I think I've heard that term a lot from the general leadership team as well, that people are consensus driven, and I think it's something good for nations in general, I think, to reflect upon as well, because I really hold that thought as a pedestal, that people should be like that. That even with a smaller footprint, they are able to create a massive impact on the entire planet, which is really exciting. But Mary, other than that, I really wanted to ask you, as someone who's either a spokesperson or someone who goes to a lot of conferences and does a lot of public speaking, and maybe something for me to learn as well, that first of all, how do you be concise and very, very much coherent with your speech? And second of all, how do you overcome stage fright?
Yeah. So I think the two are very much tied together, actually. If I would, speak at a conference or, at a keynote at GSMA or something like that, I think practice is definitely important. So know the content of your speech, or whatever you are going to talk about. And you on any of these kind of speaker training courses, they'll tell you, bring 2 or 3 things that you want to say. And maybe your speech is 5 minutes, maybe it's 30 minutes, or, maybe you're lecturing for an hour. But think of what are the 2, 3, max 4 key messages you want to get through. And don't put too many things on the slides if you're, having slides. And then if you can know your topic and pace yourself a little bit with the speaking. I like to kind of run it through in my head a few times to make sure I'm not rushing at the end or talking too long. And then if I'm kind of comfortable with the topic, then I'll go out, and maybe there's a lot of people, but I think, look, if they've asked me to speak, I must know something that some of these people don't know or would like to hear more about. So, you're bringing something. And then from the stage fright or confidence, I think it's like, I guess everybody has their own technique. I like to sort of take a couple of really deep breaths before I go on. And then if I go on, make sure I stand in the right place and look at the audience, because I used to have a tendency to pick, that one person in the front row and sort of stare at them for the whole speech, and that's disconcerting, I think, for a lot of people. So somebody gave me a tip to look above the audience a little bit, and then I'm always, if I feel, I like to just check what I'm wearing before I go on. So, you don't have some button open or something, and then say, okay, I look okay, I feel okay, deep breath, and then treat it like you're talking to 2 or 3 people. I think that's what I like to think. Don't worry about the number of people, just think you're about talking to 2 or 3 people about one of your favorite topics. It's kind of my approach, at least.
So switching gears a little bit, Mary, I want to hear a few words about core values. I think ethics and core values play a really vital role in terms of any sort of innovation that has to happen. So what are your thoughts about that?
Absolutely. I think respect is very important, and it comes in a lot of different areas. Just because there's someone who's maybe more junior or has a different background does not mean, or because they think differently to you, or have a different process, does not mean that they know less or cannot bring something innovative. So I think respect from the point of view of making sure you bring everybody into the conversation and listen. You can you always have one or two people maybe that can dominate a room of 10 people, but if you're chairing the meeting or running the brainstorming, make sure that guy or girl at the end of the table who hasn't said anything, ask for their opinion. And sometimes people don't always want to speak very much, but it's good to bring everybody in. So I think respect is very important, and then bringing all of the things onto the table are very important for innovation, because you may have some great ideas, but there's probably something that could be added to that, or adjusted, or tailored. And I also think it's really important to have a lot of different backgrounds, whether it's from a kind of where you come from, or what you've studied, or what kind of attitude you have. It's very important for innovation to have a big mix. You might think you're coming up with the best idea in the world, but if you're all from the same course in the same university, from the same city, you're probably thinking very similar. So mixing it up a bit is good to come up with more innovative ideas, I think, as well.
Right. And Mary, now that we're reaching the end of our conversation, I want to ask a few things on the closing note. And first ones would be that now that you're looking back at your career journey, and you might have a lot of reflections about it, you might have a lot of feedback to your own self about what you could have done differently. So now, if somebody were to take a fresh start and they're either student or early career professionals, what would be your advice to them to either not get disheartened, think big, or maybe plan or devise a strategy in terms of how they can have a really good career growth? So I would like to hear a few sentences from your overall reflections.
Yeah, so if I think for a new student entering a company or thinking about what they would do, I would say find something that you think, firstly, you would be interested in. Don't do something, it sounds a bit cliche, don't do something just for the money. Of course, it's nice if both are combined. So find something that's interesting so that you can get some, momentum, and you have that will to get up and do something, every morning. I think it's also important to have a bit of confidence in yourself. So, when that job comes up and you think, oh, I don't know if I'm really qualified, apply. What's the worst that can happen? They can say no, but then they know you're interested, and maybe next time you're higher up the scale, or maybe you get the job, and then your challenge is to find people that can help you. So build a network as you go. Don't be afraid to take a leap, and sometimes just ask your manager, or ask people in other areas, can you help me? I would like to try this out, or can you advise me? Find a mentor if you're not sure what the options are. And I think it's always good to ask different people, express your interest in moving up or on or out to different areas, and you will be very surprised how many people will come back and actually help you with that. And I have to say also, I think it's important to work hard and do your share, but I really am a firm believer in some kind of work-life balance as well. You need to stay healthy and have a few things that you do outside work. I don't believe in kind of 7-day 24/7. I work hard at work, and sometimes it's extra, but I think it's important to have a work-life balance as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think sometimes it's kind of glorified in movies as well, that sure, if you're prioritizing work, but you're maybe neglecting your family, maybe neglecting your health. And although it might not seem impactful at that moment or instance, but over time, I'm pretty sure it's going to build up and create something bad.
Yeah, and I think, if you can relax a bit, sometimes your brain does its thing anyway, and you come into work like, oh, I have a new idea. It's
Absolutely. And second of all, Mary, I want to ask you about routines in life, basically. So it's very commonly said that people attribute to a lot of people. For example, one of the most famously known is Elon Musk, who's like working all the time, sleeping in the factory and whatnot. And I understand that's all cool and everything. But is there a substance to that claim? Do you think it's a sustainable lifestyle, or what is your perspective on it?
Yeah, so I'm not really a fan of that approach to work. It doesn't work for me, at least. I if The structure I have, at least, is make sure that I will contribute and drive and move things forward as much as possible in work. And I would expect, if I'm working with a team, I would expect others to, do their share and things like that. But I always like to be consistent in getting some exercise every day. For example, maybe it's a short run, maybe it's a walk or whatever, and then spending time with, the family. It's important to, as far as possible, have breakfast together, have dinner together, kind of thing. And people do different things. So sometimes I'm finishing conference call and drive my son to a football match or whatever. So it's a bit about the balance. And I think it's very hard to maintain a sleep in the office 7 days a week approach, but maybe it works for some, but it wouldn't be my recommendation, at least.
Absolutely. And Mary, my last question would be about people being not only known for their job titles. I think people are much more than their team's avatars and their official profiles. What are you known for other than the title that you hold in a corporate office?
I think I'm known, maybe from a work point of view, of getting things done and bringing different people together to get things done. So a kind of bit of spider in the web, if you like, kind of, bringing some order together in slightly more chaotic situations. And then I hope I'm known as enthusiastic and, having good ideas as well. And maybe a sense of humor, I think.
Nice. I think that's important. I like that.
Exactly. And that, I'm well able to talk, sometimes possibly too much, but also able to listen.
Awesome. Mary, with that, we'll conclude the conversation for today. Both me and Nimra are deeply humbled by the opportunity of having this meaningful conversation, and I really hope that our audience are going to have conclusive takeaways from our conversation. And as far as our general audience are concerned, if you like the content, please feel free to like, share, and subscribe and show your support. And until the next episode rolls out, do check us out on other streaming platforms. Do check out Mary's LinkedIn profile. She's amazing. And lastly, take care of yourself. Don't give up on your goals. And until the next episode, this is your host, Usama, signing off. And we'll see you soon. Thank you.